planning in the SCA, how to structure your retirement investment accounts so you can contribute to the SCA now and in the future if you wish to be. Okay, I put down 2 hours, but there's no way we're going to hit 2 hours. All right, and that's me staring out at you there. That's me actually looking presentable, respectable. Can you believe that? Me looking respectable? All right. Now, maybe I should start by telling, by the way, can everybody hear me? Just nod. Okay. I'm going to start by telling you who I am. Okay. Master Llewellyn ap Teirnon, aka me. I've been in the SCA for 35 years, and I've now lived in 4 kingdoms. I'm a laurel and a pelican, and I've been an officer at every level of the society from kingdom on down. And I'm currently on a consultative committee that's working for the board of directors. That census they've been doing, that's one of the things that we're talking about. So that's what I'm doing society-wise. Now, professionally, I've worked in the financial industry for 25 years, and I've worked with investments and retirement accounts. And I currently work for one of the top 25 small advisory firms as determined by Barron's Magazine in the US. I'm not giving you investment advice. I'm not allowed to do that because I'm licensed. But I am going to tell you about some of the stuff you can do for yourself in the SCA. Okay. Now, let's start out with some basic rules. Rule number 1 is the most important thing that you're going to see all evening. And I'm going to keep repeating it again and again and again. If it is not in writing, it does not exist. Okay? Openness and honesty prevents disputes and issues. Simplicity saves time and angst. And rule number 4 is see all of the above. Okay? For example, let's say that you want all of your garb to go to the Barronese lending library for, okay, but somebody else says, oh, they promised me I was supposed to get that. If you put it in writing, what can they say? Cool? Now, first of all, do you have a will? If you do not have a will and you are above the age of 50, I'm going to be blunt. Do it now. Okay? Wills make things so much simpler. They really do. And people aren't trying to guess what your intentions were. Now, number 2, have you made an SCA inventory? Do you know what you have? For example, Francesca. Yes, I know you're hiding back there. Do you have a list of all those wonderful cookbooks you have?
No, I do not.
Do you have a list of all those wonderful cookbooks? Okay. Well, in my case, I have about 700 cookbooks. And I have in writing who's supposed to get them. But I also have all kinds of garb. I have all kinds of coronets. You know, who is supposed to get it? What are you going to do with it? You know, make sure people know this. What about all your camping gear? Who is going to get that tent? Do you really want people arguing over it? Okay. This next one, C, is one that really seems to trip up a lot of people. What to do with your scrolls? What do you want done with them? In my case, my laurel and pelican scrolls will be cremated with me. That's my wish. and I put that in writing. But as the next item says, do you really want the stuff to go to Goodwill? Did anybody happen to see that sword that somebody found on the Goodwill that was going, the pictures were going around all the SCA sites the other day, where they were trying to find the person, and it was about 30 years old that the person had gotten the sword, and I believe it was determined they'd passed away. Do you really want your SCA stuff to end up on a shelf at the Goodwill? If it's scrolls or stuff people have specifically made for you, etc., what do you want to have done with it? Now, do not rely on your friends to carry out your wishes if they do not know them. Write it down. I cannot stress that more than enough. I mean, in real life, you'd not believe the disputes that we've had to work our way through in various times. For example, somebody said, oh, my parents intended my daughter to get all of their cars. Well, it's not in the will, and your brother and sister don't seem to remember hearing that. But of course they did. And it ended up in court, actually. And because it wasn't written down, the person that said the daughter was supposed to get the cars lost. Okay. And by the way, anybody like the Scooby-Doo thing here? What's an empty old suit of armor doing in the driver's seat of this pickup? Well, they didn't know what to do with the suit of armor or the pickup, so they left them at the Goodwill. You know? Now, there are things the SCA will accept and what they will not. Okay? If you decide to leave something to the SCA. Be very careful about conditions on the stuff. By the way, there's a kitty right behind you, and that's a beautiful cat.
Thank you. That's Dobby.
Hi, Dobby. Widget or Foobar should be wandering through here soon. If you try to put conditions on something, the SCA has every right to say no. And in many cases, they will do so and have done so. For example, if you say, okay, and I have just an example here, I want to leave $500,000 to the SCA if they declare that Apple iMacs are period and proclaim it into the known world. They shall receive these funds. Well, maybe the SCA will do it. You know, if that's really your wish that iMacs be period. Is anybody there on an Apple right now? Raise your hand.
I am, yes.
I figured the way you were responding.
No, I'm laughing at the next one because that is just like fun. It's funny to me that somebody would actually ask that, but I'm guessing it's been asked because of both of these. But yeah, I can definitely see both these being funny.
Well, a second example is if the SCA proclaims that Richard III was the rightful king of England and Henry VII was a usurper, and they must file suit to have this declared, they shall receive the funds. No way. No way will the SCA do that, because the SCA is going to have to put out expenses. They're going to have to prove they've done it, and it's going to be in court for probably 100 years. And anything you donate to the SCA would be eaten up by all the expenses. People don't seem to realize what goes with some of these bequests. Okay. Now, somebody say something?
Oh, I actually do have a hypothetical here.
Turn up your microphone a little bit, please.
All right, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, this is going to be a hypothetical that I'm curious about, but I'm guessing it's probably going to be a no, just because of the game mechanics and the whole honor system that we have. hypothetically, let's just say, like in one of these conditions, if it's like somebody's going to pass, they were fans of one particular crown, and they were going to give a bunch of money to the SCA if they made that crown, if that crown made their next of kin X, Y, or Z award. That would traditionally be something that the SCA would have like a hard no on, correct?
You are correct on that. You are correct. The SCA does not like conditions because they're hard to administer and may leave bad feelings. Pardon me, just one second. I need to go create a husky. Okay. And by the way, Richard III was the rightful king. Now, lay down. I'm the mean daddy. Lay down. Lay down, Zeus. Now. Okay. That's what you get when you have a Great Dane named Zeus and a husky named Hades. Oh, look, the kitty. All right.
Yeah, this one is
As I
stopped.
said, conditions really are things that the SCA does not want to have to deal with. It makes it very hard for the SCA. Now, this is a more difficult one, a more dicey one. It's called targeted funds. Funds must be spent for a particular purpose. Okay? And I have seen this happen, so I know. For example, you leave a trust, and the SCA has to have a member on that trust to help administer it. And all the money coming from that trust has to go to a particular usage. Okay? Well, that trust has its own tax ID, its own tax reporting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all the money that you're making from that trust might not balance out the expense you're having. See what I'm saying? Okay. So there are a lot of time and reporting requirements for these when you have targeted funds and trusts and things of that nature. And it may not be in the SCA's best interest to accept. And if they don't accept, then it would go to probate. And your family or whoever would go to it, or if nobody else is willing to take it, it will go to the state. So it could go to the state of California. It could go to the state of Iowa. It could go to the state of Ohio. And the SCA does not have to accept. Okay. Now, for example, I give one here. All the funds must be spent in making sure that Swedish dance classes are held every year in March in Val Tallor. Well, first of all, Swedish dance classes? Nobody's smiling. I'm sorry. But you would have to file a report every year showing that you've done that. And there are a lot of documentation and a lot of reporting requirements that just make this very bad. Okay? Now, if you do have a device that's been recognized by the College of Heralds, which I do, and I know most of you do, you can transfer that device to another person upon your death. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. Your request must be in writing from you, as in that must be written before your death, or your executor, and has to be accompanied by a copy of your written instructions from you or your will, and your death certificate. It has to go to Society Herald's office. So, for example, if you pass away, your wife, your son, a household member, whomever that you've designated can have your arms. And those are mine down there at the bottom of the page, by the way. How many of you realized you could pass these on? I had to specifically ask. I was asked that during one of these sessions, and so I had to specifically research that. But you can pass them on.
Oh, dang.
So if you do not pass them on, then they just stay on the records that this is, these are your arms, these are your badges,
Uh-huh.
and no one else can claim any part of them, correct?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Now, I'm sure if your spouse were to come along and say, my spouse has died, I'd like to inherit their arms, I'm sure the heralds might work with you, mind you. But otherwise, you're SOL. Okay. Now, I'm gonna give you a couple of terms. The first one is liquid versus liquidable. Okay. Liquid. What? Pardon me, a husky is causing some issues. Yeah, this is what happens when you give the husky calming tablets. This is after 3 calming tablets. Yeah, I'm the cat person. And so guess who walks the dogs and takes care of the dogs? C'est moi. Anyway, all right. Liquid means that it is very, very, very easy to transfer funds and send them out. Liquid basically means money. If you have liquid assets, you've got money, and that's what's coming in. The SCA prefers that because it's easiest for them to keep track of. It's easiest for them to work with. Okay. Now, liquidable, that's something that can be easily sold. For example, you have stocks that you've willed to the SCA. Those can be easily sold. You have mutual funds. Those can be easily sold. Yes, sir.
So does liquidable only apply when we're actually talking about um, basically like stock assets and things like that, or can it also apply to like precious metals and stuff like that? For instance, if you have like investments in gold or silver, or as you were kind of saying before, coronets. I know most people don't actually use like actual silver or gold, but let's just say somebody was a billionaire in the SCA. They became a duke. They had like the full actual solid gold with all the fancy jewels and stuff. And they say, on my death, I want to pass that along to the society.
This is something that's readily able to be sold at that time.
Okay.
Okay. For example, you will hold shares in a gold ETF, exchange traded fund. That's easy to sell. The bars of gold, if somebody gives that to you, somebody's going to have to take charge of those and make sure they get sold. So you have a security issue there too, by the way. All right. Non-liquid assets, and this happens a lot. Yes, ma'am.
Actually, I'm not ma'am, I'm they, them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have my glasses on.
Ah,
I apologize.
what, apology accepted. What about collectibles and things like that?
Okay, that's what we're going to talk about next.
Because I have over 140 Monopoly sets.
Uh-huh. Okay. That would be a non-liquidable asset. Okay. The SCA cannot easily take possession of it. It would be, for example, say you gave them your car. Somebody would have to go there, pick it up, take possession of it, arrange with a dealer to sell it. Okay. The more paperwork and the more time intensive it is, the less likely the SCA will accept it.
Okay.
But say say with your Monopoly sets, you had arranged for, you'd had them assessed, you had a letter of value there, and it said somebody that would be willing to broker them for you, something of that nature. The burden has to be taken off the SCA as much as possible. Okay.
I think
And the best thing you could do in that case is put in your will, they are to be sold and the funds sent to the SCA. As I said, the more that the SCA is given to do, the less likely they are to accept something. Because their time and effort flying somebody out or arranging a truck or anything of that nature may be more than they're actually going to get. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Thank you.
Okay. I have a couple examples here. Now I've got my glasses on. And great, the cat's been playing with my glasses. Wonderful. Lord George's sword shall be donated to the SCA and kept in remembrance of him. Well, I'm glad Lord George loved the SCA, but what the hell are we supposed to do with it? You know, we do have an archivist, but that stuff is basically kept in storage. And if it's not something special to the SCA itself, why are you giving it to them? I know that may sound cruel, a bit cruel, but if it's not the first sword used in the first crown tournament of the East, why are you giving it to the SCA? If it's something special, then maybe it's good for the archivist, but otherwise, figure out someone else to give it to or sell it. Okay, the second one down. This land shall be kept by the SCA in perpetuum and used for SCA fighter practices by the Shire of Beltsworn. I'm going to tell you right now, will be an enormous pain for the SCA. They would not accept it. Why do you think they accept it?
Because you have a whole bunch of logistics issues in controlling land, and you have property taxes and all the other stuff, plus like any taxes on any kind of physical structures or anything that's on the property.
Yep, maintenance, taxes, tax filings, paperwork with attorneys, etc. Now, if you willed that to the SCA, or you said that it was to be sold and the funds given to the SCA, that would be a different story. Am I making sense? Does anybody have questions at this point?
Honestly, I'm trying to come up with some,
Oh, good.
because my goal, fingers crossed, is to actually get us to as close to that 2-hour mark as possible. But that's just me.
All right, let's go on to the next page then. I'm going to explain different types of investments, so you know what I'm talking about when I go into the next account, when I go into the next section. Stocks. Do you actually know what a stock is? It can be easily traded on the exchange, usually, not always, usually. But it's actually, you own a piece of that company, a microscopic piece of that company. That's basically what stocks are. Okay. Bonds and CDs pay out at a fixed rate over a specific period of time. Okay. Mutual funds. Mutual funds invest in either different stocks or exchange traded funds or something of that nature. Mutual funds are not just one investment. They're a group of investments that are meant to supposedly limit your risk. And usually they'll have some kind of goal in mind, such as I want to be in, let's see, Italian banking, an Italian banking mutual fund, something of that nature. I want to be in developing markets. So you invest in those companies. Now, mutual funds just trade once a day, and they can be held in investment accounts or they can be held in retirement accounts. All of these can, by the way. Exchange traded funds are like mutual funds, except they're traded all the time. They're traded continually. They're based on the value of the holdings within them. So if you have one share of Google, one share of Ford, and one share of Radio Shack, it's not based on the value of just one of them. It's based on the value of all of them. And it's a percentage. Has anybody ever heard of annuities? Know what they are?
The thing that you get when you win like a giant like lottery prize or something like that, or a major court
Well,
case.
that's what you should buy, yes.
And it's
An
like,
annuity is where you pay a particular amount of money up front, and it will pay out sometimes over your whole life, usually over a fixed time. It will guarantee you're going to get a specific amount, but you may get more than that. Okay, but don't expect to get incredibly high returns from them. That's why people don't deal with them. Now, options are calls and puts. What calls and puts are is where you buy, you're betting on whether a stock's going to go up or down, basically, and you can buy that bet. It's like buying a lottery ticket on the stock market, but on a particular stock. And they expire over a certain amount of time. So you can buy it and say, okay, if this stock goes up to this point, I will sell 100 shares at that point. Or if it goes down to this point, I'll buy 100 shares. It's basically a bet on the market. Now, alternative investments, it depends on the type of account you have. Most retirement accounts will not let you use alternative investments. These are private, usually private investments in companies that are not on an official stock exchange. So if you have a private company that decides to give out 1,000 shares in its company, great, you get 10 of those, but you can only sell them back to the company itself directly, and there's no way of determining exactly what price you're going to get. So they can be kind of dicey. That's why they're not allowed usually in retirement accounts, because you cannot bet, you cannot make a bet on your retirement for these alternative investments. By the way, that's Widget right there in the picture. Okay. Ruby dooby doo.
By the way, Lou, I was wondering who that nice torty cat was.
Oh, that's Widget.
Thank
We
you.
name our cats after tools. So we have Fubar, we have Widget, we had Lugnut, you know, that sort of thing. Whoop. Sorry, go back to where you were. I locked this before I started using it, but for some reason it came back again. All right. Brokerage accounts. Okay. Nice picture, Antonio, by the way. Brokerage accounts are what people think of when they are thinking of accounts you can invest in on the stock market. Okay. They are taxable. So any money that you make within your account as an investment, it is taxable. You will pay tax on it if you sell the stock. Okay, and you will pay tax. You have unlimited deposits into these accounts and unlimited outward withdrawals. There are no limits the government places on moving stuff in and out of them. Okay, we already talked about the type of investments you can have in these. These can be you can just about have anything in these, except some companies will limit alternative investments. And some of them will also limit exchange traded funds, but that's changing. They do not have beneficiaries normally. And this is the important part, okay? They do not have beneficiaries. They are part of your estate when you die. They are probatable. What that means is that if you die, they're part of your estate and they have to be taken to court to figure out who gets them. And that's very expensive, can be up to 10% of the value of your investments to get through probate. Average is 7%, but it can be up to 10%. Okay. However, you can change that. You see we're down here where I have designated beneficiary accounts listed? Many, many, many brokerage firms allow you to do something called a transfer on death account or a designated beneficiary account with your brokerage accounts. Okay. That means that, yes, it's a standard brokerage account and you're going to use it throughout your life to do whatever you want, but when you die, it's going to go to somebody automatically and it's not going to go through probate. And that's important. It's a very important thing. You don't want probate. Okay? What you want to do is you want to contact the companies that you have these accounts with and specifically ask them how you add beneficiaries. Because it can be done. And then what happens when you pass? If you leave it to the SCA, what happens is the SCA will be notified that they've inherited it. They'll receive an account with all these holdings that they can then easily liquidate. Yes, they will pay taxes on it, but it makes, the effort to go through probate is so much more expensive than simply inheriting this account and paying taxes on it when you sell it as an organization. It's possible for you to do that with your brokerage accounts, this is what you want to do. It saves everybody hassle, time, and pretty kitty. Okay. Now, I'm also going to talk a little bit about trusts, because everybody that I've talked to about on these lines, they ask me about trusts. Why can't I put everything in a trust and then have the trust tell the SCA what to do with it? Well, let's go back to what a trust is. Okay, a trust is an agreed upon legal arrangement through which funds are held by a trustee, and it's used to the benefit of a third party, the beneficiary. The creator, who's also known as the grantor of the trust, may create these before or after their death. So you can create a trust, you can create a revocable living trust, or irrevocable, it doesn't matter. But you can still use everything in it all through your life. And then when you pass, the beneficiary then becomes the organization or another person or whomever. This is where the SCA can have issues with the trust itself, because there has to be a trustee for a trust, and the trust, if you have particular instructions for that trust, what you're trying to do with it, this will cause the SCA issues and cause reporting issues, etc. And it may not be worth the SCA's time and effort for whatever money the trust is giving them. So if you create a trust, make sure that you designate a trustee who's not within the SCA. Well, not the SCA itself. You can designate whoever you want as a trustee to see that whatever your wishes are carried out, but don't necessarily leave it to the SCA itself. Okay. Now that these trusts are usually taxable. That's where the issue comes in. and must be reported to the IRS. So if you have somebody that's willing to be your trustee and pass money each year to the SCA, great. If not, set it up so everything gets liquidated. Okay? Now, if you set it up before your life, understand they can be irrevocable or revocable. But a revocable one becomes permanent on your death or the death of the last account holder. Okay? Am I pretty clear on that? What questions? Let's try that. Any questions on this?
Trust, I actually, just to like clarify with that, the thing to do is basically.
You're breaking up, Antonio.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me a little bit better now?
Yes.
Okay, so basically with trusts, we typically want to like avoid them if we're going to be giving money to the SCA, or if we actually are going to go through with the trust specifically, we have an individual person who is the executor of that rather than having the SCA as the organization being the executor, and just having whoever the individual is just give the money out as a cash prize.
Trust can be very good, but just don't expect the SCA to administer it for you.
Well, then the question for that would become, why because if the trusts are going to be just a pain in the butt for the SCA because if they're administering it,
Well, the thing is, the trusts don't have to be a pain in the butt for the SCA if you have a trustee that's administering it. That's not the SCA.
I definitely get that, but my question is, why would a trust be better than just saying, okay, I liquidate all my assets and I give, or that can be liquidated, and I give all of that as like a one lump sum to the SCA, and like just.
Well, that's just it. Some people do these trusts because they do them as a way of avoiding issues. It's a way of avoiding disputes. It's a very well done process. Very well thought out process usually.
Okay.
And it makes your wishes extremely clear. And they do that because it's irrevocable before your death. You get to change your mind. Anyone else? Okay, I also put in some additional websites you can look at about trusts here. And I'll be glad to send these to anybody that contacts me. Now, let's talk about retirement accounts. I love retirement accounts. Absolutely love them. Because the way they're designed, they automatically have beneficiaries. Okay? So you can name whoever or whatever. Okay? I'm going to skip a little bit because we're going to talk first of all about different types of beneficiaries a little bit. There are two different types of beneficiaries you need to know about. One is a primary beneficiary, and the other one is a contingent. If your primary beneficiaries pass away, then it goes to your contingent. You can make the SCA contingent beneficiary if you wish. So if your spouse passes away before you, you can make it the SCA as your contingent. That way you know the way you have it set up, your spouse is taken care of. But once they pass, if you want it to go to the SCA, it'll happen. Okay? And Let's talk about the different types of accounts, and I'll come back to this part. Okay. Your most common type of a retirement account is a traditional IRA. This is pre-tax contributions from your paycheck, usually. Okay. This also might be where you have matching contributions from your employer, etc. Okay. Now, this can also be known by other names too. They can call it a SEP. They can call it a rollover IRA, any of that. But they're still all forms of a traditional IRA, which is pre-tax contribution. And there's no limit to how much you can do. Okay. Now, your Roth, it's post-tax contributions, and they are limited in how much you can deposit to them, because the government wants its money one way or the other. The best thing about Roths is that they grow tax deferred. You already paid the tax beforehand. As long as you keep the investments in there long enough, you can withdraw them without paying more tax. The traditional IRA, you do pay tax when it comes out. So it's pay now or pay later. And you're just making a bet as to whether the account will grow faster, pre-tax or post-tax. Okay. Now then you have 401ks. And these are employer retirement accounts. A lot of these are starting to get rarer. I mean, they're still the overwhelming majority of people have them, but they are starting to get less common. Okay. But also have beneficiaries. IRAs of both types of IRAs have beneficiaries. 401ks have beneficiaries. Okay. Now, there's also something when you're designating your beneficiaries called pro rata versus per stirpes. Anybody know what that means? Okay. Very simple. Let's say you have 2 children and you pass. If both are primary, they both split. Understood? Okay. However, if one of them passes away before you, pro rata means the other one gets it all. The surviving one gets it all. Now, per stirpes, however, means if you have 2 children and one of them passes away before you, but has children of their own, their share goes to the children. Okay. So this is how you can also add the SCA, and protect what you want to go to the SCA and protect what you want to go to other people. You can have, depending on the company, I've seen 30 beneficiaries on an account. So the account was going to be divided 30 different ways when the person passed. Most companies will limit you to maybe 10 at the outside. Okay. Also, if you hear people talk about other types of accounts, they can also be designated along the same way. CRA or company retirement accounts, those are usually private ones. There's I-401ks, which are a 401k, but it's usually a independent one. They don't want the company itself to administer their 401k, so they give it to another firm. The company lets them do it if they want to, but the company doesn't administer it. So it's still 401k, but an independent one. A profit, yes, ma'am.
Not
Sir.
ma'am.
Sorry, I don't have my glasses on again. Oh, there's cat. Yes, it's the cat. I recognize the cat. Yes, sir.
Right. No, different cat. There's 6 to choose from here. Uh,
I see the per ride behind you, so.
right. That's why. um, so I have a pension from a past employer.
Uh-huh,
Was that the CRA?
yes.
Okay.
That's usually a CRA, although some are now classified as I-401Ks as well. But usually CRA would be a pension.
I just had never heard that term, so that's why I was wondering. Thank you.
There's also profit sharing plans where companies, their stock price goes through the roof and they want to make sure that their employees get some of it. Well, they'll put it in a profit sharing plan. It doesn't go directly into your retirement plan to start off with because it takes a while to usually takes a while to mature. So consequently, they want to make sure you stay there after you get your share of the profit plan. So if let's say they give you 1,000 shares, but it only matures at 10 shares a year or 100 shares a year, you see what I'm saying? You have to be there for a certain length of time. And 403B are usually public retirement plans of one form or another. Okay, any questions, guys? All right. Now this is where we wind down a little bit here. Again, avoiding issues. Verbal versus written instruction. In the SCA, let's face it, we know all of our friends. We know what they want. La da 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 da. I know exactly what he wanted done with that. But what do you mean? You know exactly what he wanted done with it. It wasn't that. I've seen families torn apart because written instructions were not given. Okay. If it's at all possible to designate beneficiaries on any of these accounts, do it now. Don't wait. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Okay? Make sure that you're open about what you're doing because anything you do should not be a secret. You know, I know you want to do something nice for the SCA, but your family or your friends should know what you're intending on doing, especially your family, because otherwise the SCA might get dragged into court. I've seen that happen. Not the SCA, but I've seen other organizations dragged into court because money was left and they didn't know it was going to be. Now, 2 big tips for preventing disputes. 1, if you have a spouse or a cat, make sure they're taken care of first and that they know your wishes. Simple. And B, make sure that people know the special place the SCA has in your heart. As you can tell from my t-shirt.
I love that t-shirt.
I got that t-shirt the year after I was laureled. Francesco, were you the one help me pick that out? No? Okay. Okay, what questions do we have here, guys?
Master Lou,
Yeah.
I may have missed this, but in the chat, there's a message from Rose Marion. Her
Uh-huh.
company has profit sharing, but it goes directly to them, not to a retirement account.
Uh-huh.
Is that common?
It does depend on how the profit sharing plan is structured. Okay. What we frequently see is what I've seen the most of is I've seen the profit sharing plan where it's put away and it doesn't mature until retirement age. I've seen that frequently, but it does depend on how the profit sharing plan itself is structured. But any of these plans should allow you to have a beneficiary designation.
And then
Anyone else have questions?
I do have a couple.
Okay, Antonio.
First off, and this is just more of like a 20,000-foot view question with everything. How you've been, and again, I'm 26. I'm fingers crossed going to be here for a long time. So hopefully I don't have to worry about leaving an estate, or well, further have to build an estate before I can leave it to anyone. But I don't plan on actually leaving anything to anyone for a good long while. But how you have basically been going through the class is basically kind of saying that having your wishes written down in like a will or something of that nature is like a very, very, very strong suggestion.
It's essential.
Okay. So my question was basically like, there is like no way to actually sort out your assets either than write a will or go to court
And designate a beneficiary or designate beneficiaries. That's why I would say designate beneficiaries, because that avoids all of this.
and is the will and is like a traditionally written will the only major vehicle that you have to do that, or are there other ways?
No. Contact the companies that run these accounts directly.
Oh,
They will have ways for you to designate beneficiaries.
okay. Excellent. And then the other kind of question that I did have, because I didn't really see it in there, was brokerage accounts.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to really talk about finances, but I am starting to build one up, putting a little bit of money in that particular side of the world.
Okay.
If somebody were to unfortunately pass with were to pass and have an active brokerage account,
Mm-hmm.
that would operate very similarly to your more traditional retirement accounts, I would reckon, correct?
Well, what you want to do is contact the brokerage company directly and ask them how you make it a designated beneficiary account
Okay.
or a transfer on death account.
Okay.
But ask them about designated beneficiary first. That's the most common phrasing.
Excellent.
That avoids probate completely.
And probate is basically
Taking it to court, the judge says, "What's his wishes? You're the executor of his will. What are his wishes? Okay. You have to have the lawyer there. He's charging you $700 an hour, et cetera, et cetera." So even if it takes half an hour, you're still going to be charged $700 just for the lawyer being there for 1 hour, and it's going to take a lot longer than 1 hour.
dang.
So ask them how to make your account a designated beneficiary account.
Okay. And then basically in that case, with all these different types of investment accounts that we have, if we have it written in our will that X person inherits it, but we don't tell the companies that, or we don't set that up with the companies, basically that would automatically bring it into a probate situation? Or is that something like, if it's like in a will that's rock solid and like done all through the proper channels that way, then that person can just contact the companies themselves and say, hey, I have this will, it's in writing from so and so, here are their account numbers,
No,
that transferred, or
no. If there is no beneficiary specifically designated on an account, it must go through the courts. Now, if it's really small, it could go through small claims, through small estate process. But usually, these are usually larger than that. Your estate would usually be larger than the small estate process for a state. Okay. Designate a beneficiary.
so designated beneficiary, and then write a will,
And write a will. But if you designate a beneficiary on something, you don't have to put it in the will.
okay. So if we did though, would that be considered just like redundant and people don't normally do that? Or is it better to just be safe? And
What I've seen most people who actually do put beneficiaries on everything do, when they do their will, they simply put an informational page saying, I have made such and such the beneficiary on my IRAs. I have made such and such the beneficiary on my brokerage accounts. It's just an informational page. That way nobody's confused.
that makes sense.
But it doesn't have to be probated that way. That informational page does not have to go through the courts.
No.
You're gonna save yourself 75% to 80% of all costs designated beneficiaries.
Nice.
What other questions might we have? Yes, sir.
I know in California, all I have to do for writing a will is just writing it and having two people witness me signing it.
Mm-hmm.
Is it better if I went to, say, a paralegal to have it done so I know all the I's and J's are dotted and the T's are crossed?
I do recommend speaking to a paralegal or a lawyer. That way, nothing's missed.
Okay.
You'd be amazed at stuff people do forget.
I'm sure I will.
Oh yeah. For example, Uncle George is dead. He left his IRAs to his brothers, and they left his brokerage accounts to his nieces and nephews. What about the house and the car? That's why having an inventory before you speak to somebody is also a good idea.
What about a living trust?
Well, I like living trusts because that way you can if you decide to revoke something, you can do so. If you decide to change something, you can do so. But if you do suddenly pass, it then usually becomes irrevocable.
It usually becomes what?
Irrevocable.
Okay.
So basically in that case, it's like you have to have a living trust if you want to be able to edit it after you've written it, or?
I'm sorry, what?
So does that mean that you have to have it done as a living trust as opposed to a non-living trust if you want to be able to edit it from the point that you write it to the point that you die?
Living trust means that you're living when you create it. Okay, and if you make it revocable, it can be changed. If you make it irrevocable, it can't be changed. But most revocable trusts become irrevocable upon the death of the last account holder. Any other questions, guys?
Hi, Master Lou. It's Rosamond.
Hi, Rosamond. How are you doing?
I am great. I have a weird question.
You usually do.
How very specific do we need to be when we name the SCA as a beneficiary? So say I liquidate my house and I decide I'm going to give the proceeds to the SCA. Part one of the question is there a very specific name that should be used? I come from insurance, and so
Yes.
you know how when we do certificates of insurance, it has to be incredibly specific or the
Yes.
lawyers don't like it. I'm wondering if that's a similar situation for the SCA.
Yes, you want to list the Society of Creative Anachronism and its address,
Mm-hmm.
and you just want to include as much information as possible. And if necessary,
Okay.
you can also get the tax ID number from the SCA itself.
Okay, So then to narrow it down even further, no offense to everyone else, but what if I want to donate all of my money to my particular kingdom or my particular barony? Do I just extend on to the Society for Creative Anachronism, blah, 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 Mellipedus, California, and then underneath that put the barony or the kingdom's specific information?
Yes.
Okay. That was it. Thanks.
Not an issue, not a problem. The more specific you are, the better.
Great.
I have a husky that's decided he's shaken off 3 calming tablets already. One is supposed to knock out any dog. Other questions, guys?
But huskies aren't just any dog.
Oh, I know. I know.
I'm going to say thank you very much, Master Lou. I'm going to sign off because I have 6 pairs of eyes looking at me. Well, this one's looking at the screen, but she will soon. So I'm going to go feed them. Thank you very much. This was very informative.
Thank you, good sir.
Okay.
I have one more question
Sure,
before we wrap up on things.
sure.
I know that basically giving a thing on that basically leaving something to the society with the conditions is generally seen as either a no leaning maybe or a outright no.
Yeah.
How would that work for something that both the people in your kingdom and you know that is something that you want to do? Say, for example, your kingdom crown's regalia is in a really bad state of repair, and they're looking to do new ones, and you want to donate specifically to get the new regalia, just because you know that when that's going to happen, you're probably going to be passing around that time. So in a situation like that, or in something where it's like the SCA has a specific goal that they're trying to execute, when you're trying to do, when you actually end up going, would putting a condition like, oh, this will go to help achieve whatever that goal is in particular, would that be something that just complicates things? Or is it just better, even in that kind of a case, to say, you know what, just give it as a blank check, here's the SCA here, I liquidated the money, and bada bing, bada boom.
Now, what you can do is you can make that one of the reasons why you're giving money is you know that let's say the crown of the Middle Kingdom needs restored, and you would like to make that possible. But do not make it a if then. If they restore it, I'll pay for it. You can say that you wanted to have it, you want to make it possible, but make sure that there's no reporting that they have to do if you do that. Don't require them to do any kind of reporting.
Definitely.
Understand what I'm saying?
I do. And it definitely makes a logical sense, because the more paperwork they have to do and the more justification that they have to do to actually prove that they've done the follow through on that is just more of a headache than anything beneficial for them.
Exactly.
Generally, from what I'm getting.
Exactly. The thing is that the more conditions you place, the more onerous you make the task of accepting the funds, the less likely they are to accept them. But let's be honest, in the SCA, if you make your wishes known and you donate the money, it's going to be used for the reason you asked, you gave them the money. But as long as they don't have to do any kind of reporting to the courts or anything of that nature. As long as you don't put it in your will that that's what it's to be used for, because then they'd have to prove it to the court, you're going to be fined. Now, if you have it written down as informational that you would that that you're trying to help with that, great, but it doesn't have to be used for that purpose. Do we have other questions? All right. Well, then I think that we're done. Thank you very much, everybody. Sorry my camera wasn't working.
Thank you.
Definitely, thank you. It was a really great class.
Oh, well, if y'all want the slides or anything like that, just feel free to email me and I'll be glad to help.
Yes, thank you for teaching this class.
Y'all take care.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Have a good evening.
Goodbye.